Next to Meir Javedanfar, we're left with an open question about the strategic conduct of Iran the day after. That's on the assumption the nuclear deal will go through. Perhaps, Meir, you could raise the resolution on that question.
Thank you very much. ברשותכם, אני אדבר באנגלית, כי עשיתי את המצגת באנגלית. יש לי 15 דקות, have 15 minutes. First of all, before I start, I'd like to thank the IDC. I don't know how many of you in your life or your parents have been immigrants, but let me tell you something. When you go to a new country, you always remember the people who helped you, who believed in you first. And the IDC is the first place in the state of Israel which believed in me. 5 years ago I came. Professor Alex Mintz believed in me. He gave me a chance for which I'll forever be grateful. IDC is my home, and this is something that I can assure you no immigrant will forget, the first place that gave him a chance. Now, thank you. Regarding Iran, I think, well, first of all, I'm going to look at the consequences of the deal in terms of the Middle East, but let me just state my position regarding what my Farsi-speaking colleague, Mr. Shabtai Shavit, said, who I tremendously respect. I actually think the Iranian regime is likely to hold on to the deal more because Ayatollah Khamenei has reached a decision that he needs to stop than President Obama. The Iranian regime thought that it could challenge the international community. It thought that it can continue building centrifuges. It thought that it can continue threatening Israel's existence. It thought it can continue to block the questions regarding its previous military activities, and America is not going to do anything about it because President Obama talks about poetry and Iranian culture. They found that they were wrong. They found that Obama, through his outreach to the people of Iran, caused a lot of damage to the Iranian regime internally. More importantly, he built a coalition. He has brought the Russians and the Chinese on board. The Iranians thought they could drive a wedge between them. They realized they failed. So I think actually the Iranian regime has realized that they made a mistake. This is why they are here, and I think this is why they will make sure that they will keep to a deal, because they cannot deal with the sanctions. The Iranian regime, Ayatollah Khamenei, it seems to me, believed that he is Mohammad Mossadegh, the leader of Iran in 1953, who nationalized Iran's oil, and people of Iran stood behind him. Don't forget that the Shah dismissed Mossadegh and brought another prime minister who wanted to reach out to Britain to reach a deal to end the sanctions, Ahmad Qavam, but the people of Iran demonstrated against it. They wanted Mossadegh. They wanted the sanctions because they believed in Mossadegh as somebody who wanted the best for the people of Iran, somebody who wanted freedom for the people of Iran. The people of Iran, it seems to me, believe the opposite regarding Ayatollah Khamenei. This is why his regime failed. The regime expected that the sanctions, they can live with the sanctions and beat them because the people of Iran will be behind it, but it didn't realize that the people of Iran saw that the very same regime which talks about their welfare now and wants to represent them over the nuclear program was killing them in 2009. And that the leader of Iran is no Mohammad Mossadegh, and that the people of Iran do not see the Iranian regime as their honest lawyers. That this is a regime that's only interested in itself, and the regime realized it cannot beat the sanctions. This is why it has come to where it is today. Now, let me just start with the idea, what's Iran going to be like after a deal? Iran is going to be more aggressive. Iran is going to be more aggressive. Make no mistake about it. But it won't be because of money. It won't be because it will have more money because of the sanctions. And I'll start here with why. The hypothesis is Iran deal, end of all sanctions, there'll be more money for the Iranian regime, therefore we have a more aggressive Iranian regime in the Middle East because it has more money. The independent variable here being money, and the dependent variable being the Iranian regime behavior. Or the reverse to it. If there's no nuclear deal, sanctions remain, therefore less money for the Iranian regime, therefore a less aggressive Iranian regime in the Middle East, and there you have Mr. Rouhani smiling just to drive home that point. I disagree with that. First of all, I don't think funds on their own do not mean that Iran is going to be more aggressive in the region. If sanctions remain, the Iranian regime in the Middle East will be the same. And I repeat, will be the same. Why? Because when it comes to Iran regime decision-making in the region, there are more important factors than money. Much more. Let's see what they are. First of all, let's start with the numbers. Numbers don't lie, right? We've heard that time and again. Let's look at the numbers in terms of Iranian involvement in the region, and most importantly, how much it costs. Iranian allies in the region. Let's start with Mr. Bashar al-Assad, the butcher of Damascus. Last year, Iran gave Bashar al-Assad something like 3.6 billion credits, and 1 billion went for non-oil products, okay? Now, we've had from the Syrian opposition that so far Iran has invested $15 billion since 2011 in the Bashar al-Assad regime. So an average of $4 billion Iran is spending in terms of supporting the Assad regime. Let's look at Hezbollah. And I'm quoting Matthew Levitt here. I don't know if he's here, so I better be right. $200 million a year, support for Hezbollah. This is how much it costs for Iran to keep Hezbollah going. Support for Shia militia in Iraq. Let's look at the big militia groups. First is Saraya al-Salam. I beg forgiveness from my Arabic-speaking friends here. My Persian accent comes into my Arabic, I'm sure, as well. That's the biggest group. 60,000, that's the Muqtada al-Sadr Mahdi army. This changed its name. Now it's called the Peace Brigade. It has 60,000 soldiers. Then you have the Badr organization, Badr Brigade, 10 to 20,000 members. And then you have Asaib al-Ahl Haq, which is the League of the Righteous, 10 to 20,000 members. Okay. These are the big ones. You also have a host of other pro-Iran Shia militia in the region, in Iraq, such as Kataib Imam Ali, Kataib Hezbollah, Harikat Hezbollah al-Nujaba. These have got 1,000 or less members. How much does it cost for Iran from now to support these groups? Well, let me tell you something. The Iranians have done a masterstroke. They went to Abadi, who is supposed to bring the Sunnis together, make it inclusive. They went and said to him, look, if you want us to build Daesh, you have to include us in your budget. So what we'll do, we already have the Revolutionary Guard in Iran. We're going to have a Basij, the People's Militia. We'll bring all these groups under one group, under the umbrella of one organization called Hashd al-Sha'abi, People's Militia, and the money to run that is now paid by the Iraqi government. The Iranian regime doesn't pay for this. The Iraqi taxpayer pays for these 90,000 soldiers. 27,000 of them recently took part in the battle to liberate Tikrit. They didn't do such a good job because they had to call for the Great Satan to come and help them. It doesn't work really well when you don't have air cover. I think it was a bit embarrassing for them, to be honest with you. But here it is. You can't live without the Great Satan. Support for Houthis. We don't know. First thing, I don't know how much they're paying them. I don't know. But let's put a maximum, let's say a very generous amount. If they pay Hezbollah 200 million a year, let's say 100 million. I think that's a very high figure, but let's just put that there. Hamas and Islamic Jihad, how much do they pay them? Well, they stopped paying Hamas because those ungrateful Hamasniks, after getting so much money from Iran, in the Syrian war, they turned their back on Syria and on Iran. And if you think Jihad Islami, the Iranian ally in Gaza, is grateful, think again. Recently, the Saudis attacked the Houthis in Yemen. What did the Islamic Jihad do? Did not condemn it. The Iranians did not like it, so they stopped their funding. But let's just say that there is some money and some equipment going through. $150 million a year. Again, that's a very high estimate. Estimated total cost of Iran's involvement in the region per year. I've added it all up. 4 billion for Assad, 200 million Hezbollah, 100 million Quds Force in Iraq and Syria. Look, Iran has about 15,000 Quds Force operatives. I put 100 million, again, that's a very high amount, but let's just put it there. 150 million for Jihad Islami, approximately 4.6 billion a year. Now, in the scheme of things, where does 4.6 billion a year in terms of Iranian money fit? How much of Iran's funds, what percentage is 4.6 billion? Let's look. Iran's total official budget for this year is 294 billion. But ladies and gentlemen, the Iranian regime doesn't pay Hezbollah from the official budget. They don't come to the people of Iran and say, by the way, 200 million, there's a line that goes to Hezbollah. No, that's from an unofficial budget, which nobody in Iran knows how much it is. Now, I've taken a very low figure. Let's say 10%. It's 10% of the official budget. Some people think it's 25. I'll stay at 10%. 29 billion. So total funds available to the regime is 294 billion budget plus 29 billion unofficial budget is 323 billion. That's 1.4%. That's how much it costs of Iran's budget to support these groups. Do you think if sanctions are not removed, Iran's going to have a problem paying $4.5 or $5 billion a year to keep these groups afloat? No, it won't. So money is not the issue here. So why am I standing here and saying the Iranian regime is likely to be more aggressive if there's going to be a deal? First of all, let's just say, the most important factors that determine Iran policy in the region is domestic politics, first and foremost. Iranian foreign policy emanates from its source is domestic politics. Second of all, geopolitical events in the region. I'm sure there are people in this room who know about Iran Gate. And one of the reasons that Iran decided to make an outreach to the little state and the state of Israel was at that time there was a discussion between, there was a tension between the Rafsanjani and the moderates or whatever you want to call them. And there was, of course, the hardliners, Mr. Mehdi Hashemi and Mr. Mohammad Montazeri, who died before that, who were much more hardliners. The moderates had won. We saw that Iran was willing to deal with the state of Israel. We saw it again, one of the reasons why Iran started being much more active in the region in the early 2000s was because the reformists, Khatami, they started becoming much weaker, and Khamenei started strengthening the hardliners, and the hardliners won the day, and of course that impacted Iran's much more proactive politics in the region. So it first and foremost depends which faction has the upper hand and whether the supreme leader supports them. Number two is the geopolitical events in the region. In Iran, there are two groups. One is the Rouhani and Zarif, who are the moderates. They belong to the Rafsanjani camp, and they want less involvement in Syria, and they want to reduce tensions with the Saudis. That's a picture of the Saudi ambassador kissing the head of Ayatollah Rafsanjani. Let me tell you, it's only second to being most controversial if a woman kissed them. This is very controversial to the hardliners. Why? Because the Saudis respect Rafsanjani. They know he wants to improve relations with them. Then, of course, you have the conservatives, the IRGC camp. A majority of the conservatives want the opposite. They want to challenge and isolate the Saudis. And there you have Qasem al-Soleimani, the head of the IRGC Quds force, hugging Mr. Hadi al-Amiri, a man who liked to put drills through the heads of Sunnis who he arrested when he was the head of the Badr Brigade. Oh, by the way, he's a former minister in the Nouri al-Maliki government. He's Iraqi, and oh, by the way, he holds Iranian citizenship as well. Now, after a deal, let me tell you, even after a deal, which would be a huge gain for Mr. Rouhani, he's not going to be strong. He's unlikely to have the upper hand because the conservatives are going to treat him like a sacrificial lamb for nuclear compromises. They're going to say, we make these compromises because of you, because you pressured Ayatollah Khamenei. Never mind that Ayatollah Khamenei would accept these compromises, but they can't criticize him. In Persian we say, we tell the door so that the wall hears it. So there will be all these things they'll be saying to Rouhani, of course the things they want to say to Khamenei, but they can't. But he will hear it, and that would weaken him. And the conservatives are likely to attack Rouhani for sanctions not being removed as soon as the deal is signed. So this means that in the upcoming Iranian Parliamentary and Assembly of Expert elections in February next year, Rouhani is unlikely to do well. And of course, the key regime, political and security establishment, institutions are likely to remain in the hands of the conservatives. By that I mean, of course, the security services and important places such as the Guardian Council. More important than that, ladies and gentlemen, the animosity between the people of Iran and Saudi Arabia, between Sunnis and Shia, is becoming more institutionalized. And I don't mean just even reformist Iranians are joining the game. In the one hand, Saudi Arabia, we see there was a poll recently done by the IDC. It shows that the people of Saudi Arabia view Iran as a bigger threat than the state of Israel. And of course, you hear anti-Shia preaching by Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia, and let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, it is racist. If people talked about Judaism like that, we would call it anti-Semitism. It is vehemently racist, anti-Shia propaganda being fed by the Saudi preachers. And this is institutionalizing the animosity towards Iran in Saudi Arabia. And of course, we saw recently that there was a story of sexual abuse of Iranian tourists in Saudi Arabia, which led to demonstrations in Iran. This happened in Jeddah. So the Saudi public is becoming more anti-Iranian. What about the Iranian public? The public is becoming more racist towards Arabs, especially Saudis. Online you hear terribly racist things, even from Iranian reformists. And of course, 4 days ago, 32 Saudi pilgrims in Iran were poisoned. In the city of Mashhad, they were poisoned. 3 of them died, 7 of them are intensive care units. In the hotel, they were poisoned purposely. This goes to show how the animosity towards the Saudis is increasing. But I think they say a picture speaks 1,000 words. Look at this picture. In Iran, one of the racist things they say to Arabs is that you're a locust eater. There's a demonstration in front of the Saudi embassy. There's an Iranian holding a picture of a locust, and it says in Arabic, Haza ta'amak, which means this is your food. This would not have happened 2 years ago. Oh, there are racists in Iran, much like every other country. Some people are racist, some are not. But the fact that the Iranian regime allowed such a picture to be published shows that the Iranian regime also wants to institutionalize this hatred towards the Saudis. Geostrategically, and I'm going to finish with that, Iran is feeling more vulnerable after Saudi attacks against Houthis in Yemen. They thought the Saudis wouldn't do it. They're too comfortable in their Cadillacs. They're not going to get out to launch a war in Yemen. They feel more isolated after the Israel-Saudi Arabia rapprochement. But of course, more importantly, Iran regime sees itself as a victim, not also as a victimizer of a sectarian war. So what does this mean? Iran is likely to remain as aggressive, if not more, after a nuclear deal. But first and foremost, their target would be the Saudis and their ally, and I think it's safe to say we will be a second, if perhaps a distant second, when the Iranians especially look at what's happening on the borders and what's happening with Daesh, which they genuinely and honestly believe is a Saudi invention. Thank you.